Hex-a-Decimal was a game I initially created for a game jam in February of this year, but after submitting it, I continued working on the game and have updated it 4 times over the past few months, slowly changing and adding mechanics, visuals, and polish as my humble hexagonal puzzle game shapes up to be a hit with anyone who plays it. In this video, I'll go through each update from the slight tweaks of Update 1 to the gameplay overhaul that is version 4. Then, I'll discuss how constant playtesting improved my game and what I plan to do moving forward. This is Hex-a-Decimal DEVLOG 1, creating my dream puzzle game. By the time I had published my last devlog, I had already released version 1 of Hex-a-Decimal. It contained a few minor changes. The menu was redesigned to include conveyors to make it feel more lively, transitions between menus were added, conveyors would animate by subtly squashing and stretching, and bugs were fixed. The release of this update is where the last video ended, so it's a fitting start for our journey in this video, and by the end, you will have seen the Game Jam game transform into something more. After releasing version 1, I published devlog 0 of Hex-a-Decimal before working on my next game jam. However, it wouldn't take long before I got back to working on Hex-a-Decimal as I started developing version 2. Over a month after the release of version 1, the second update came out. This update wasn't just a touch-up of the Game Jam version, and I had already made a video about the development of Hex-a-Decimal. No, Hex-a-Decimal was a new long-term project, and I spent that month doing a lot. Version 2 fixed a few bugs, changed around a few levels, and added some quality of life improvements and polish. But the biggest changes were at the top of the changelog. Solutions would now be saved upon exiting a level, and solutions would be scored in a way that invited competition and optimization. These changes would prove effective as I started showing off my optimized solution to playtesters and discussing strategies with anyone who would listen. One particular playtester also gave their feedback on the quality of life improvements, noting how much better it was that the direction of non-conveyor tiles could be changed without them reverting back to conveyors. I'll talk more about playtesting later, but I cannot stress enough how much playtesting improved Hex-a-Decimal. With version 2 released, I was getting more confident in my abilities, and it wouldn't be long before I found yet another way to improve Hex-a-Decimal. I was doing some playtesting shortly after the release of version 2, when I was distracted by a glaring oversight. The playtester was solving one of the more difficult puzzles, but all I could focus on were the colours used in the colour rotator tile. You see, this is what the colour rotator looks like, and these are the colours used in the rest of the game. Do you see it now? Here, these are the hex values of the colours. Notice how the blues are different? This could not stand, so since we were playing on my PC, I could just change it. I changed the blue of the colour rotator to match the cyan aqua blue used in the rest of the game, and while I was in the sprite editor, we discussed ways to make the colour rotator look better. Afterwards, I decided to go through and give all of the level elements the same visual touch-up, making Hex-a-Decimal look and feel that much more like a polished, finished product. As for the other things implemented in version 3, there's some quality of life changes that had to be made to keep up with the ever-changing game. There's also a lot of editor changes. Yes, the level editor that's been in the game longer than any other feature had finally gotten some improvements. Levels could now be given names, a song from the OST could be selected to play instead of the default editor theme, and certain restrictions could be placed on the player for more complex puzzles. Also, a new tile was introduced, the teleporter. None of this had an impact on the main game, but the increased focus given to the editor and new features introduced for it would make a lot more sense once the next version came out. Version 4 is the most recent update. As I'm making this video, I have started development on version 5 and you can find information about it on my Discord server. The link is in the description. Before we tackle major gameplay changes version 4 presents, here's all the minor changes. The in-game level menu, previously text on a blank sprite, now looks like this. These buttons can be interacted with using the mouse, although keyboard shortcuts are still recommended. Sound effects are used for all menu transitions, not just when entering levels. The name of the game's window has been changed from the default Made with GameMaker Studio 2 text to Hex-a-Decimal. You know, the game's name. The icon has also been changed from the default GameMaker icon to a hexagon. Also, a new tile has been introduced to fill in this gap in the menu, this gap in level progression, and this gap in the keyboard. Speaking of level progression, I believe that's the final change that version 4 has to offer. The core progression of Hex-a-Decimal's mechanics is dictated by the content of these 50 levels. Each level is a puzzle made by me using the level editor, and until now, the levels were the same ones that I made for the Game Jam version way back in February. Playtesting throughout the jam ensured that new players could pick up on the nuances of the game's mechanics with only these levels and a bit of tutorial text. But as you can probably guess, many of the levels were rushed to fill the 50 level requirement within the Game Jam. Because the levels were rushed, a lot of them were tedious and not fun to solve, even to me, the person who knew how to solve them. In fact, level 14 in particular was so bad that I had to replace it in a previous version. I can do better. So, I started cutting. I cut out any levels that I thought were bad and kept the good ones. I started by cutting the obviously bad levels, increasing my standards until the 50 levels I started with was condensed into 30. I smoothed out progression, fixed and added some levels to help players better learn the game's mechanics, and then, all I had left to do was make the final 20 levels. Level 31 would introduce the player to the teleporter, and levels 31 to 40 would teach the player how the teleporter works before testing their knowledge with puzzles more challenging than anything they had previously faced. So, did I do that? Surprisingly, yes. Of course, if you want to be the judge of that, you can play the game yourself. Hex-a-Decimal version 4 is available for free on itch and GameJolt for Windows devices. The most difficult level to design, at least in the 31 to 40 range, was, of course, level 40. Not only does it have to be a challenging puzzle, but as it's the 10th and final level of the set, it has to follow the rule of using the 64 tile. I eventually came to this design for the level, but obviously, I couldn't just put it in the game until I verified that it was solvable. Level 40 was the first level that took me over an hour to solve, and it wouldn't be the last. With levels 31 to 40 verified and implemented into the game, it was now time to make a difficult decision. What will the final component be? For those of you who haven't played Hex-a-Decimal yet, the player can place down conveyors, which move a signal from an input to an output. As the puzzle gets more difficult, new variations are unlocked, which allow conveyors to do things like change the color of a signal or only let through every second signal. If I was going to add a new component, it would have to fill a role that cannot be replicated with other components. For example, the sensor is the only way to split or filter signals, the rotator is the only way to change the color of signals, etc. It took a while to figure out, but I eventually narrowed it down to one idea, which I would come to call the breaker. The breaker is set to a color and only allows signals of that color through. It can then be quote-unquote tripped by giving it a different colored signal, deactivating it for the rest of the puzzle. After implementing the breaker, it was now time to design levels 41 to 50. Despite being the final 10 levels, the first 4 of this set were relatively straightforward puzzles, as they were designed to introduce the player to the new breaker component and teach them the nuances of this final mechanic. Levels 45 to 50, however, would not be so kind. Level 45 looks like this, and requires the player to demonstrate a thorough understanding of Hex-a-Decimal's mechanics, old and new. Levels 46 onward are designed to be even harder, with level 49 being so difficult that I had to make it easier because not being able to solve its original version was going to delay the update. And level 50 was so difficult that I thought it was impossible for hours before being able to solve it. Yeah, if you're looking for a puzzle game that takes simple mechanics and uses them to build complex interactions that'll overclock the problem-solving part of your brain, I cannot recommend Hex-a-Decimal enough, despite it being my own game, of course. As you can probably tell, I am really passionate about this game. My little hexagonal puzzle game is shaping up to be a hit with everyone who plays it. But what's so special about this game that none of my other games seem to have? And more importantly, what can I and other indie game developers learn from Hex-a-Decimal? Well, there's a lot of factors, and the first one would probably be that I have made many other games before even conceptualizing Hex-a-Decimal. The thing is, people seem to glamorize the idea of developing your first game and striking gold immediately, but the truth is I was only able to make Hex-a-Decimal what it is now because I've made similar games before and have learned from my mistakes. See this game? This is GravStack. I made GravStack nearly a year before I made Hex-a-Decimal, and there have been a lot of similarities between the two games. They were both made for the same game jam. They both have 50 levels grouped into sets of 10, with each set introducing a new mechanic. They both have a soundtrack with the exact same format, etc, you get the picture. But GravStack was frustrating to play, difficult for new players to pick up and learn, and didn't have any interesting interactions or emergent properties that made the player feel smart for learning the game's mechanics. And in that sense, Hex-a-Decimal is not GravStack. If you're an indie dev watching this, I cannot stress enough how important it is that you do things. Make games, even if they suck, because the next thing you know, you will make something that sucks less and less until you start making good things. Of course, other than my previous experience making a puzzle game, there were a lot of factors that helped shape Hex-a-Decimal into what it is today. Playtesting is another huge factor, and I made sure to start playtesting as soon as possible and as frequently as possible. Feedback from playtesters was critical and helped me fine-tune the tutorials, smooth out bumps in difficulty, and overall help the game be more intuitive for new players. As an indie dev, it's easy to get caught up in the vision you have for your game, so frequent and early playtesting is something I cannot recommend enough, as it'll help you communicate that vision to your players through your game. And obviously don't just sit behind them and backseat game your own playtesters. If your game can't teach them and you have to constantly interrupt, that's a sign you should rework your tutorial. As I mentioned before, I started working on version 5 of Hex-a-Decimal. This update will primarily focus on audio, as I've already begun doing a lot of work with adding sound effects, adding volume sliders to the options menu that let the player control OST and sound effect volume separately, and planning to remake the soundtrack in FL Studio. As for updates past version 5, I'll probably just fix problems as I find them and improve the game slowly until about version 9. After that, I'll probably start from scratch and remake the game with all the knowledge I've gained. Definitely won't be a free game anymore. Obviously, estimating a price this early into development is going to be a bit rocky, but looking at the prices of other puzzle games and comparing it to what Hex-a-Decimal would reasonably become with another year or so of development, I'd say $9.99 in Australian dollars or $6.99 in US dollars would be a fair price. Of course, you don't have to worry about that, because until I make that big jump to Steam, you can enjoy the most recent versions of Hex-a-Decimal for free on itch and GameJolt. The links to buy the game, as well as links to join my Discord server, can be found in the description. So yeah, that's about it for this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section, and I'd love to see your activity in the Discord server. See you in the next video.